For my morality midterm, I chose the show Chicago PD. This show is about the intelligence unit of a police department located in Chicago, Illinois, and describes how these brave heroes combat the most heinous crimes, including capital murder, drug trafficking, rape, and organized crime. The main characters of the show include Sergeant Hank Voight, which is played by Jason Beggy, Jay Halstead, who was played by Jesse Lee Soffer, Kyle Ruzick, who was played by Patrick Fluger, Kim Burgess, who was played by Marina Squirciati, Kevin Atwater, who was played by Leroyce Hawkins, and many more. The main character, Sergeant Hank Voight, who leads the intelligence unit, has a core value of courage. When making an ethical decision, it is best to categorize the ways of thinking ethically into three categories: virtuous ethics, deontological ethics, and consequentialist ethics. Sergeant Hank Voight uses a system of deontological ethics. Besides that, it is his job. He is always following the laws, thinks about conflicting duties, and he is always looking towards his ethical principles. Kohlberg's theory of moral development is a way of categorizing moral thinking based on age groups, decisions based on the impact of social order, and how one formulates a decision. Three characters that exhibited different stages of Kohlberg's moral development were Sergeant Hank Voight, Kim Burgess, and Aaron Lindsay. Sergeant Hank Voight, being the most important in the intelligence unit, exhibits thinking from stage 6, also called universal principles. Although he's expected to follow the law strictly, he uses his own reason and looks to the future to better society. For example, there are many instances where Hank Voight releases suspected criminals of a crime, but spies on them to see whether they will give the unit a lead or physically get themselves into more trouble. He tracks them via license plate or implements a tracking system on the phone. Not only is this against the rules of the police department, but he believes that it is the right way to bring more criminals to justice, and it matches his way of dealing with things. Kim Burgess is a character that perfectly embodies Stage 4 in how to maintain social order. Although she can turn her head away from Voight's actions, she is a cop that always obeys the rules intently. She understands the rules on books, focuses on law and order and justice, and respects the property of others without a warrant. Not only does she stick to the rulebook, but she is always wearing the appropriate attire. Before she moved up to intelligence in Season 4, Burgess worked as a neighborhood police officer. She would always dress properly and pay attention to the rulebook. The final character is Aaron Lindsay. She left before the current season, Season 5, to work for the FBI. However, while she was in intelligence for the earlier seasons, she exemplified thinking from Stage 5, the idea of social contract and individual rights. She obeyed laws very well, and she wasn't afraid to confront Hank Voight if she noticed something fishy. She was always seen bending the rules slightly. However, since she would account for all the other criminals' family life. During one episode in Season 4, she found a father of 3 children with possession of cocaine. Rather than arresting the man, she made him her CI, which means that he has to give her valuable information about people whenever she needs. This way, the man could enjoy regular life with his family. Erickson's table of cognitive development is another way to look at moral development. Within his table of development, he uses keystone events to look at the process developing through certain ages. Within Chicago PD, 2 characters that have been through different stages of moral development according to Erickson's theory are Sergeant Trudy and Detective Ruzick. Trudy, who is an older woman and doesn't engage in fighting crime anymore, has proven that she hasn't fully accomplished Stage 7. She is seen working at the desk in the lower area and is in charge of organizing all the crimes that the intelligence has to go for. She is also trying to accomplish Stage 7, which is also known as generosity versus self-absorption. During the stage, a person of the age of 40 to 65 will understand how to make life decisions and how to make life count. Although she is living her full life, Trudy continues to stick with the police department and refuses to advance her romantic life, raise a family, or engage in other hobbies. It's strictly police work and little concern for others for her. Detective Ruzick is someone who has successfully completed Stage 6 in his life, also known as intimacy versus isolation. Not only has he had commitments to many girls in his career, but he has also understood feelings and emotions portrayed by girls, which makes him an overall great guy. One of the most significant relationships he's had was with Kim Burgess. They were together for many months, but decided to call it off since they've seen each other every day at work. With every choice made in life, an object, intention, and circumstance must arise. The object describes an action performed, an intention describes why it happened, and a circumstance describes the information surrounding the situation. In Season 5, Episode 10, Detective Halstead put his career on the line when he punches a civilian after he made fun of his girlfriend, who was caught for dealing drugs. After punching this man, he went viral when someone got the fight on video, and he received much backlash for punching a civilian while on police duty. The object of the situation was that Halstead punched an innocent man after fuming with anger. The intention was that he was angry after the man insulted his girlfriend, and Halstead couldn't resist. The circumstance was that they were in a public street and someone filmed the scene. After, he received major backlash from the city and had to take a small break until the situation settled. A lax conscience describes a conscience that is not used. An erroneous conscience describes a conscience that chooses wrongly. An informed conscience describes a conscience that is used properly and fully developed. In episode 12 of season 5, an incident shocked the police department after Detective Atwater was kidnapped by Mexican drug cartel leaders when he got in the middle of a robbery. After the cartel leaders captured their target, and Atwater too, both men were chained in the basement of an abandoned church without any technology, and the police could not find them. Within the episode, an example of an erroneous conscience was used when the two Mexican cartel leaders took Atwater. Although they didn't have much of a choice, they deliberately messed with the police department, which would have caused them a life sentence had they not died in a gunfight soon after. An example of a lax conscience was used when the cartel leaders tortured both victims rather than keeping the money offered to them. The drug lords thought it would be smart to torture both of the men and the man's friend, who they didn't know was a cop. The two kidnapped men offered the assailants over $100,000 in the beginning, which would have been a smarter path to follow. In reality, the drug lords could have taken the money and left the city with little evidence. Finally, an informed conscience was presented when Atwater ripped the chains from the ground and escaped with the other men towards the end of the episode. Although both men were in a lot of pain from the torture, they managed to run away from one of the cartel leaders before the police managed to ping a phone number and locate the church, thus killing both of the cartel leaders. There are many ways people can justify their moral decision with reasons of fallacy. One fallacy that is common to use in Chicago PD is known as moral legalism. This fallacy is important since an individual justifies his or her moral actions with the law. One example of this was shown when Hank Voight spied on Halstead after the unit found out about his drug-dealing girlfriend, who he didn't even know sold drugs. After this, Voight tracked his car and phone and was accused of spying on Halstead after people found out. However, Voight defended his moral and harmless actions with the law by saying that Halstead was in an act of an investigation, which gave Voight the ability to spy according to law. Mortal sins are offenses that separate us completely from God. Venial sins, however, are bad, but they do not completely separate us from God. In Chicago PD, an example of a venial sin occurred when Halstead lied about having a girlfriend. Again, going back to the incident where Halstead's girlfriend was found selling drugs. He denied that he was having relations with her even though he was. This is an example of a venial personal sin since he drove himself away from God with every lie he told, but didn't commit a full-blown mortal sin. Social sin can be described as a collection of personal sins over time. An example of a social sin is seen through the use of a device called the cage in the garage of the police department. This is a location in a place where there are no cameras underneath the police department headquarters. Rather than an interrogation room, this fenced-off prison cell is where Voight hurts his victims to get answers. Although it is completely against the law, he established this cage ever since the start of the show 5 seasons ago. There are many episodes where Voight needs quick and necessary information, so he will hurt the victims or threaten to kill them if they do not give any of it out. Everybody in the unit knows about the cage. Over time, this could be an example of a social sin since Voight has used unlawful methods to extract information from criminals and uses power to keep everyone in the unit silent. There are 4 cardinal virtues that can be used to describe many people: prudence, courage, justice, and temperance. One character who exhibits both justice and courage is Detective Olinsky. Since Olinsky has been in the unit as long as Voight, he has seen a lot of things that could scar an average human. He holds the cardinal virtue of courage since he is not afraid to run into combat. He is always present to look into unseen rooms, travel in the dark to look for criminals, and arrest highly armed victims. Also, he holds a cardinal virtue of justice since he is always doing what is right for society and brings criminals to justice. On Season 4, there were many instances where Alinsky was needed to scout out drug lords or go undercover since he could make himself look sketchy. He always made sure that men would be brought to justice regarding what crimes they committed. The 3 theological virtues go as shown: love, hope, and faith. Within Chicago PD, Adam Ruzick holds the virtue of love. Beyond the fact that he is young and handsome and is looking for a partner all the time, he is always there for his partners. Even when times are tough, he may lash out at people, but in the end, he is always there to accompany them and apologize to them. Adam Ruzick, or Detective Ruzick, perfectly embodies the virtue of love. Well, that will conclude the midterm and analysis on the show Chicago PD, hosted on the NBC channel. Thank you.